sister told our parents I got fired from the fire department the same week I graduated from paramedic training. That's the thing I keep coming back to, the timing of it. Because she didn't wait to see how things would go, didn't wait to see if I'd struggle or stumble or give her something real to work with. She just decided right at the beginning to end it before it started. I didn't find out until 3 months later. By then, the damage was already done. I grew up in a small city called Macon, Georgia. Not the kind of place people write songs about, but the kind of place where your neighbors remember what you were like at 7 years old and hold it against you forever. My dad, Raymond, worked for the county roads department for 26 years. He was the kind of man who wore the same brand of work boots his whole adult life and considered that a point of pride. My mother, June, taught second grade at the same elementary school for 2 decades. She made sweet tea from scratch and kept a calendar on the refrigerator with everyone's birthdays written in red ink. My sister Dana was 4 years older than me. She had my mother's eyes and my father's stubbornness, and she had always known exactly what to do with both. Growing up, Dana was the one people noticed first. Not because she was unkind, but because she moved through rooms like she'd already decided how things were going to go. She got into the University of Georgia on a partial scholarship, studied communications, came home with a job offer before she'd even graduated. Everyone at our church asked about her. My parents lit up when her name came up in conversation. I wasn't jealous. That's what I told myself for a long time, and I mostly believed it. I was quieter than Dana, more careful. Where she made decisions fast and loud, I made them slow and private. I was the one who stayed after school to restack chairs in the gym, the one who called our grandmother every Sunday even when she repeated the same 3 stories, the one who, at 22, decided she wanted to become a firefighter and didn't tell anyone until the paperwork was already filed. When I told my parents at dinner one evening, my mother set down her fork. "A firefighter," she said. It wasn't a question exactly, more like she was testing the word to see how it fit. "Yes, ma'am." My dad leaned back and looked at me the way he did when he was calculating something. "That's dangerous work." "I know," I said. Dana, who was visiting that weekend, smiled at me from across the table. She had a particular smile she used when she thought something wasn't going to work out. I'd been watching it my whole life. "You sure that's for you?" she asked. I told her I was sure. My parents came around. My dad shook my hand the night I left for training. My mother sent me off with a Tupperware container of oatmeal cookies and told me to be careful. Twice, like the second time would actually make a difference. Training was harder than I expected and exactly what I needed. The physical demands were one thing, but the discipline of it, the precision, the way every task had a right way and a wrong way with real consequences attached, that felt familiar to me, like a language I'd been thinking in for years without knowing its name. I wrote letters home. My parents wrote back. My dad's were short. "Thinking of you. Stay focused." My mother's were long and newsy, full of updates about the neighborhood and what the garden was doing and which of my childhood friends had gotten married. Dana sent a text sometimes. Just emojis, mostly. A flame. A thumbs up. I took it as encouragement. Then the letters slowed down. I noticed it around the 6-week mark. My mother had been writing every 10 days like clockwork. Then 12 days passed. Then 16. My dad's texts went quiet. I told myself they were busy. The school year had started. The roads department had a big resurfacing project going on. People get busy. Then I called home on a Sunday evening. My mother picked up, but her voice was different. Carefully flat, like she was reading from a script she hadn't fully memorized yet. "Everything okay?" I asked. She paused a half-second too long. "We heard you had some trouble." I didn't understand what she meant. "What kind of trouble?" Another pause. "Dana mentioned you were let go." I actually laughed. It came out wrong, short and sharp. "Mom, I wasn't let go. I'm in the middle of training. I'm doing fine." She said nothing for a moment. Dana said there was an incident. There was no incident. I'm standing in the barracks right now. I just finished a 12-hour shift. My mother's voice stayed careful. She wouldn't make something like that up. And there it was. 6 words that closed a door I didn't even know was open. I tried to explain. I told her to call the station, call the training coordinator, call anyone. She said she didn't want to embarrass me. I told her there was nothing to be embarrassed about, because nothing had happened. She said she needed to talk to my dad. The call ended politely. That almost made it worse. I stood in the hallway for a long time after. The fluorescent lights above me hummed. Somewhere down the hall, 2 guys from my unit were arguing about baseball. I kept thinking, Dana knows I'm here. She's seen my posts. She knew where I was when she said what she said. I finished training 4 weeks later. Graduated on a Friday morning. There was a ceremony, small but real, the kind with handshakes and a flag and a chief who looked you in the eye when he said your name. Some of my classmates had whole families there. I had my roommate from training, Vanessa, who brought a disposable camera and took 11 pictures of me in my gear and said she was proud enough for a whole crowd. I mailed my parents a copy of the graduation photo. No note, just the photo. No response came. I got my first assignment at a station in Savannah, about 3 hours southeast of Macon. Station 7. It was the kind of firehouse that had been operating since the 1970s and felt like it. Old equipment and new equipment sitting side by side, a coffee maker older than I was, a crew that had been together long enough to finish each other's sentences. My captain, a broad-shouldered woman named Voss, ran a tight shift and expected people to keep up. I kept up. The first months were a blur of calls and training and learning which gas station made the best breakfast burritos at 5 a.m. and which streets flooded first in a heavy rain. I had never lived away from Georgia before, not really, and Savannah was its own kind of strange. Spanish moss hanging from everything, tourists in places you didn't expect, a city that felt like it was always in the middle of something. I found an apartment a mile from the station, 2nd floor. Good cross breeze, a neighbor across the hall named Marcus who taught high school history and kept reasonable hours. I bought a plant. I adopted a cat named Thursday because she showed up on a Thursday and didn't leave. Every December, I sent Christmas cards to Macon. My parents' address hadn't changed. I wrote my station address in the return corner, clearly because I wanted them to know where I was. The first year, no response. The second year, no response. The second year, no response. The third year, I sent a card that said, I'm still here, still working, still your daughter. No response. I didn't stop. I couldn't explain exactly why. Maybe it was the same stubbornness I'd always had about finishing things. Maybe it was something simpler, some part of me that refused to let the silence be the last word. About 2 years into my time at Station 7, something else happened, something good. I met Jonah. He was a structural engineer who showed up at a commercial fire call to assess building stability after we'd knocked it down. Tall, methodical, the kind of person who notices the angle of a beam the way other people notice the weather. He introduced himself to our captain first, which I found oddly charming. We talked for maybe 10 minutes while the building cooled. He asked what it was like to run into burning things. I said, you stop thinking of it that way pretty quickly. It just becomes the building you're in and the problem you're solving. He thought about that. Makes sense, he said. We had coffee the following week. Then dinner. Then the kind of slow, comfortable unfolding that happens when 2 careful people decide to trust each other. Jonah didn't press me about my family right away. When I told him eventually, he listened without filling the silence with opinions. He just said, that sounds like it cost you a lot. It did, I said. He nodded. Okay. That was it. That was enough. We got married 2 years later at a botanical garden outside Savannah. 40 people, string lights, a cake with honey butter cream that Vanessa spent 3 days making. I sent an invitation to Macon, a real one, on heavy cream-colored paper with our names printed and a handwritten note inside that said, I hope you'll come. Nobody came. The ceremony was still one of the best days of my life. 18 months after that, our son Eli was born. 8 pounds, 4 ounces, dark hair, my nose. Jonah's patience already visible in the way he just looked around at everything calmly from the start. I spent the first night in the hospital just watching him breathe. I sent my parents a letter. Inside was a photo of Eli in his first hours, wrapped in a white blanket, eyes still squinting at the world. I wrote, "You have a grandson." Weeks passed. Life adjusted itself around the new shape of our family. Jonah took on projects closer to home. I shifted to a schedule that gave me more evening hours. Eli grew into a person quickly, the way babies do when you're not quite ready for it, sitting up, crawling, saying thou with great conviction at everything. Station 7 became more than a job. Voss pushed me toward an accelerated EMT certification, then pushed again when a lieutenant position opened up. I tested for it. I got it. Lieutenant. I said it out loud in my car on the drive home and felt something settle in my chest. A kind of proof that had been accumulating quietly for years. My dad used to say, the work shows for itself eventually. He meant it about road repairs and cracked asphalt. But I thought about it a lot the night I pinned the new badge on. 6 years after I left Macon, something arrived on my desk at the station that I didn't expect. A case file from a neighboring district, mutual aid coordination, a combined response to a structure fire that had resulted in an injury, a firefighter from another department. The investigation was standard, looking at who made which call during a fast-moving situation, whether protocol had been followed, whether the sequence of decisions had been sound. I opened the file the way I opened all of them. Then I saw the name of the firefighter involved. Dana Holloway. My sister had become a firefighter. I read it 3 times. She had joined the department in Atlanta 4 years earlier. She had a solid record, good evils, commendations for 2 community events. But the incident in question involved a situation where she had made a call that her captain had not approved, entering a section of building that had been flagged for structural risk. A junior firefighter following her had been injured when part of a ceiling came down. No one had died. The junior firefighter had a fractured arm and a concussion and would recover, but the investigation was serious and Dana was facing a formal hearing. I sat at my desk for a long time after reading it. I thought about the timeline. She had joined 4 years ago. I had been in the department for 6. She had started 2 years after me, in the same career, in the same state, and had never said a word to me or my parents that I knew of. The sister who told our parents I couldn't handle the job had turned around and taken the same job, and now she was the one being investigated. Life has a strange sense of fairness about it sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. My captain, a solid man named Reeser who had been in the department for 22 years, called me into his office that afternoon. He slid the file toward me. "I've already seen this one," he said. "I know. You related?" "Yes, sir." He leaned back. "The Oversight Review Board wants someone with incident command experience who also knows mutual aid protocol. Your name came up." I understood what he was asking. "This isn't just paperwork," he said. "Her parents are listed as emergency contacts. There's a chance they'll be at the hearing." I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't let myself. That evening at home, Jonah found me standing in the kitchen not doing anything, just standing there. "You okay?" he said. He read the situation in my face before I said anything. He poured 2 glasses of water and set one in front of me. "It's Dana," I said. He waited. I told him. He listened all the way through. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to do my job," I said. He nodded. "Then that's what you do." Ely wandered in from the living room dragging a stuffed giraffe. He looked up at me and said, "Hungry." Just like that, the weight shifted. I made him a peanut butter sandwich and cut it into triangles the way he liked and told myself to keep going. The morning of the hearing arrived the way important mornings do, quietly and without ceremony. I was up before the alarm. Jonah was already in the kitchen. He handed me coffee without saying anything, and that was the right thing to do. I dressed carefully. My department blues, the badge, the lieutenant's pin I'd earned on a warm spring evening 3 years earlier. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at what the last 6 years had built, and then I stopped looking and went to work. The hearing room was standard issue, fluorescent lights, a long table, a panel of 3 reviewing officers, chairs set out in rows behind a low partition for observers. I arrived 12 minutes early. I didn't look toward the observer section right away. I set my documents down, arranged my folder, spoke briefly with the board coordinator. The room filled gradually around me, the shuffle of chairs, voices settling into quiet. Then I heard my mother say my name. Not loudly, just my name, in her voice, at normal volume, like she'd run into me at a grocery store. I turned around. They were standing just inside the doorway, my father in a collared shirt and slacks, hair mostly gray now, my mother smaller than I'd held her in memory, wearing the kind of cardigan she'd always favored. They were looking at me the way people look at something they don't entirely trust their own eyes about. I hadn't seen them in 6 years. My dad's hand came up like he was going to wave, then stopped partway. My mother's mouth opened and closed once. I turned back to my documents. The board coordinator called the room to order. What happened over the next 2 hours was formal and careful and precise, the way these things are. Dana sat at the respondents' table with her union rep. I sat at the review panel's support table. My parents sat 15 feet behind me, and I could feel the weight of their attention the entire time. The facts of the incident were established methodically: the flag zone, the unauthorized entry, the sequence of events, Dana's account of why she made the call she made. She believed she had heard someone inside. She hadn't. The building was clear. The decision to enter had been hers alone, and her junior firefighter had paid for it. Her captain was asked whether the decision reflected a pattern. He paused before answering. Dana is skilled, he said, and she sometimes trusts her instincts more than the protocol deserves. That landed in the room quietly. When the board called a recess, I stayed at my table for a moment. Then I stood, and I turned, and my parents were already on their feet. We stood in the hallway outside. A long window looked out over a parking lot. Late morning light came through flat and even. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then my mother said, "How long have you been a lieutenant?" 3 years, I said. Her voice was working hard to stay level. "You're still with the department?" "Yes, ma'am. 6 years now." My father looked at my badge, at the pin, at the tinned department seal on my jacket. He looked the way men look when they've said something wrong and know it, and haven't figured out how to undo it yet. "Dana didn't tell us," he said finally. "No," I said. "I don't think she did." My mother pressed her hand to her mouth briefly. Then she took it away. "We didn't know you were here today," she said. "We came for Dana." "I know." She looked at me steadily. "We should have come before." There wasn't much I could say to that. She was right, and we both knew it, and saying so out loud wasn't going to give anyone those 6 years back. Dana came out of a side door with her union rep. She stopped when she saw the 3 of us. For a moment, the 4 of us just stood there. The hallway was quiet except for someone's shoes on the linoleum somewhere around the corner. My dad turned to look at Dana. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked at her the way he used to look at the road when something wasn't adding up, slow and thorough. Then he said, "Do you know she was here, in the department?" Dana's eyes went to me, then back to him. "I found out a couple years in," she said. "And you didn't say anything. It wasn't a question." Dana looked at the floor. "I didn't know how to." My mother's voice came out quieter than I expected. "You told us she was fired." Dana didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was flat and tired, the voice of someone who has been carrying something too long. "I was angry," she said. "When she left, everything at home was about her. When she was gone, it was still about her. Every conversation, every Sunday dinner. Where is she? How is she? Do you think she's doing okay?" My mother started to speak. Dana kept going, not loudly. I just said it once, that she'd had trouble. I didn't think you'd just believe it and stop. I thought you'd call and find out. My father made a sound that wasn't quite a word, but you didn't correct it, my mother said. No. Dana looked up. I didn't. The silence in the hallway had a different quality after that. Not hostile, just heavy. My father turned back to me. He cleared his throat. I have a grandson I've never met. Yes. How old? Almost 3. He looked at the window, the parking lot, the flat morning light. That's on us, he said. Not just Dana. That's on us. I didn't disagree with him. My mother reached out and touched my arm just briefly with 2 fingers the way she used to when I was small and something had frightened me. It's not enough, she said. But I'm sorry. I nodded. Okay. The board coordinator appeared in the hallway doorway. We're resuming in 5 minutes. We filed back in. The second half of the hearing moved faster. The board had enough to work with. Dana had not contested the facts. Her union rep made the case for her intent, her record, her remorse. The board deliberated for 40 minutes. The outcome was a formal reprimand, mandatory retraining on incident command protocol, and a 90-day probationary period. She kept her job. She kept her rank. The junior firefighter she'd endangered was reportedly doing well, and a letter from him had been submitted to the board expressing no desire for further disciplinary action against her. When the gavel came down, Dana nodded once and kept her face still. I had seen that particular expression before. It was the one she wore when something had gone exactly as badly as she feared, and she was refusing to fall apart in public. The room emptied. In the parking lot afterward, we stood by my car, the 4 of us again, with more space between us this time and less to hide behind. Dana looked at me. She didn't look away. I'm sorry, she said. Not the tired kind from the hallway, a different kind, direct. I know, I said. She shook her head slightly. That's not enough. I know that too. She looked out across the parking lot. I joined the department because of you, she said. I didn't know what to do with that. I told her. You could have called me, yeah? She exhaled. I could have. My father put his hand briefly on Dana's shoulder, then dropped it. He was never a person who touched easily. He looked at me. Can we come see you? See Eli? I thought about my son at home right then, probably making his giraffe climb the couch cushions, asking Jonah for a snack with complete confidence that the snack would appear. I thought about what it would cost him to have grandparents and what it would cost him not to. Yes, I said, you can come. My mother pressed her lips together. Thank you. We didn't hug. It wasn't that kind of day. But we stood there for another minute or 2, which was something. 3 weeks later, my parents made the drive to Savannah. Jonah grilled chicken in the backyard while Eli rode his tricycle in circles on the patio, narrating his own progress out loud. When my parents' car pulled up, Eli stopped pedaling and looked at me. Who's that? Your grandparents. He thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. Okay. He got off his tricycle and walked over to the car. My father stepped out. Eli looked up at him with the frank assessment only small children manage. Are you Grandpa? I guess I am, my father said. Eli held up the giraffe. This is Gerald. My father crouched down to look at it seriously. Nice to meet you, Gerald. Eli decided that was satisfactory. He took my father's hand and led him toward the backyard to show him the ant pile he'd been monitoring near the fence. Just like that. My mother stood by the car and watched them go. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying, exactly, just full. Jonah walked over and introduced himself and offered her a glass of lemonade and led her to a chair in the shade, and within 10 minutes she was telling him about the garden back in Macon like she'd known him for years. I sat down at the patio table and watched my son explain the ant pile to a grandfather he'd met 4 minutes ago. And I thought about all the ordinary things that fill a life, The ones that feel too small to notice until you realize how many of them you missed. My parents had kept every Christmas card. My mother told me later, over dinner, while Eli was in the living room watching cartoons. She'd kept them in a shoebox in the closet. She'd read them more than once. She just hadn't known what to send back. I didn't tell her how many nights I'd wondered if they'd even arrived. Some things don't need to be said out loud to be understood. Dana and I started talking again slowly, the way you start a fire in wet conditions, carefully, with patience, without expecting it to catch right away. She came to Savannah twice in the following months. She and Jonah got along well, which helped. She was better with Eli than I'd expected, patient in a way I hadn't seen from her before. Motherhood, she said once, laughing slightly. It's still theoretical for me, but I'm practicing. I asked her once, not accusingly, just to understand it. Did you really think I'd fail? She was quiet for a moment. I think I wanted you to, she said, for about 10 minutes, and then I didn't anymore. But the lie was already out there. I thought about that. 10 minutes. 12 years. The worst things often start that small. 6 months after the hearing, I was promoted again. Station captain. My own house, my own crew, my own shift. The ceremony was held at the department's main hall on a Thursday morning. Jonah stood beside me. Eli sat in the front row between my parents and Vanessa, still holding Gerald the giraffe, already distracted by the ceiling fans. My mother had her phone out and was taking pictures with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. When my name was called and the chief pinned the captain's badge onto my jacket, my father stood up before anyone else did. He's not a demonstrative person, never has been. He stood up and he clapped, not loudly, just steadily, the way he did everything, and it meant more than a standing ovation from strangers would have. Afterward, in the parking lot, he hugged me. Brief, firm, the way he used to when I was small, and something good had happened. You finished what you started, he said. I know, Dad. He stepped back. His eyes were the same as I remembered. Gray and careful, and for the first time in a long time, clear. I know, he said quietly. That's the point. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat out on the back porch while Jonah put Eli to bed. Thursday, the cat was on the railing, watching the yard with the patient authority she'd maintained for years. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere, a few blocks over, someone was running a lawnmower. I thought about the road that had brought me to this porch, the training barracks, the Christmas cards, the phone call where my mother said she didn't want to embarrass me, the hearing room, my father crouched down to meet a stuffed giraffe. People ask sometimes whether I'm bitter about the years that were lost. The honest answer is, not anymore. I was for a while. Bitter is heavy, and I was already carrying a full load. What I understand now is something simpler. My sister made a small, selfish decision and then didn't know how to unmake it. My parents made the easier choice and then lived with it until it became the harder one. And I kept sending cards to an address I wasn't sure anyone was reading because something in me believed the door wasn't locked, just stuck. It took a hearing room and a badge and a little boy with a stuffed giraffe to unstick it. If you're listening and there's someone you've let silence pile up between you, I'm not going to tell you it's easy to clear. It isn't. But I'll tell you this, the truth has a way of finding its moment. And when it does, the only question that matters is whether you're ready to let it in. Thank you for being here with me today. I've thought a lot about what actually happened in that hearing room. Not the formal parts, the board, the documents, the gavel coming down. The part that stays with me is smaller than that. It's my father crouching down in our backyard to shake hands with a stuffed giraffe, completely serious, like that was the most important introduction he'd made in years. Maybe it was. People talk about cause and effect like it's always clean, like every action produces a predictable result and the math always balances out neatly in the end. But what I lived through was messier than that. Dana made one small, selfish decision on a bad day and then spent years unable to find her way back from it. My parents took the easier path and chose not to ask questions, and then lived with that choice until it became the harder one. And I kept sending cards to an address I wasn't sure anyone was reading because I couldn't bring myself to be the one who stopped first. None of us were villains. That's the part that took me the longest to accept. Dana wasn't evil. She was jealous and young, and she said something she couldn't unsay, and then pride kept her from unsaying it. My parents weren't cruel. They were the kind of people who trusted the people closest to them, and that trust got used against all of us. Even I wasn't blameless in the silence. I could have driven to Macon. I could have shown up in uniform on their porch the way I showed up in that hearing room. I didn't. Partly out of hurt, partly out of something that felt like dignity, but might have just been stubbornness. What I understand now is that integrity isn't only about the big moments. It's not just about running into a burning building or sitting at a review panel when it would be easier to recuse yourself. It's about the small, private decisions, whether you correct a lie when it costs you something to correct it, whether you ask the question that might make you wrong, whether you keep sending the card even when nothing comes back. My dad used to say the work shows for itself eventually. He meant roads and asphalt, but I think it applies to character too. You don't always get credit in real time. Sometimes the proof shows up 6 years later in a hearing room you weren't expecting to share. The thing about resilience is that it doesn't feel heroic while you're doing it. It feels like making your son a peanut butter sandwich and cutting it into triangles and going to work the next morning. It feels like Vanessa taking 11 pictures with a disposable camera because she was proud enough for a whole crowd. It feels like Thursday, the cat sitting on the porch railing like she owns the evening air. I didn't get those 6 years back. Ely doesn't get to know what his grandfather's handshake felt like when he was 2. Those things are gone, and the honest answer is that they hurt to think about. But here's what I also know. The door wasn't locked. It was just stuck. And all it took to open it was one day when the truth finally had nowhere left to hide. If you're carrying something like this, I'm not going to promise it resolves the way you want it to. Sometimes it doesn't, but I'll tell you what I believe. The people who keep going, who keep doing the work quietly and without recognition, who send the card even when nothing comes back, they're not naive. They're just operating on a longer timeline than the people who gave up. Eli is going to grow up knowing both sets of grandparents. That matters more to me than being right.